Maybe was newly added to our list of contacts that will was through our task force or at one of the meetings at the township. Okay, yep. Yeah, and I think we had asked if you wanted to be notified. Yeah, that's right, that's fine.
If you want to sit over here, if you're alone at a table, they tend to pick on you.
For 7 years, I don't know.
And then the north part is where they'll have
That
track to unload.
And I went to
It'll be like the mine.
and this young lady comes up and starts talking to us.
No.
Her and Mike were carrying on this conversation. And
They also had more lights on it for the mechanic or something, because it looked like to me so
Especially during the construction.
They
have to have lights on that.
Because
I introduced herself.
I came from Hartford Road, and
Hello.
All right, I think we can get started today.
Answered that phone.
I want to thank everybody for coming here as we start our the new year, I guess, in February. As we're going to go over some of the new chapters, some of the drafts that we've had prepared. I know I think I see a couple new faces in the room here, so I don't know if you guys want to introduce yourselves at all, or.
I'm Don Olson, and this is Sue, my wife. We live at Lake Holton,
Okay.
8 miles southeast of town.
Perfect. Well, glad you can make it.
We're here to learn.
All right. Perfect.
Charlie Tumajan, we live in Sioux Falls. My wife's originally from this area, but we just moved for our move back to be moved in the summer. I retired after 40-something years in higher education.
Thanks for coming. So I guess we can get right into it. We just have we have some chapters that I had sent out to you earlier or later in January, going over our introduction, our existing land use, which will next time we meet include future land use as well. I know I've included the future land use map that we had somewhat have that together for you in that section, and then natural resources and open space and our historic preservation. Again, I'll say that they're drafts. We would love to make any changes. If there's anything that you guys think that we need to look at again, kind of the main thing, a little bit more of the filler in as far as how it's written up. Some of the main things I would like everybody to look at is our goals and what we call our action steps in the document. So I guess if we wanted to go over the introduction, Pat, do you want to go over much with that? So I guess there really isn't anything as far as the introduction goes. If there's some changes, if you've read through it and there's some changes that you want to, you can let us know what you want, or if you had went through them, made any corrections, we would take them markups from you as well.
And I did send stuff, and thank you, way back on the introduction, you had sent information, so.
So I guess if there's no comments at this time on the introduction, I will go into our existing land use. And I'm just going to pull up the same document that you guys are looking at. Of course, with the land use, as we just kind of a little bit of background, we just kind of wanted to go through some of the history of planning. You can see some of the years that we had in place when our first commission was put into place and when we actually had a staff. There's a couple other adoptions with our first zoning ordinance, a couple other things that we're going to look into because we couldn't find the exact date on one of them. So we'll be looking at that in the future. I guess we worked with the existing land use. We came up with our existing land use summary. That's going to be the map as you, the diagram as you look forward. That breaks down into our residential, agricultural, non-residential, parks and open space, our public institutions, government lands and offices, vacant lots, and then of course the incorporated communities. From that, using our GIS system, we were able to come down and break down each of the types of land uses that we have in the county and get kind of a depiction of what the county looks like out there from on the map, that point of view. From that breakdown, of course, as you know, most of our area is designated as ag land, and with that, 81.6% was ag property. We also have a map in there that goes over our distribution of residential dwelling units, which single family make up 25% of the county's unincorporated area, with many of them being in that 0 to 2 lot size. And as you look in further, we go over the commercial and industrial, which since over 80% is ag, 1% of that is actually designated as commercial. Less than 1% is designated as commercial or industrial property. And also with the public and institutions, again, less than 1% make up that unincorporated area because so much of it is designated as ag land. So you can kind of see here on the graph for the existing land use summary, goes over it. We put that graph in here just to kind of give people, when they're looking at this document, to say, you know, what is the trend, what types of percentages are we looking at for residential. You know, we don't, expect that residential land use total percentage area is going to jump up to 50% by any means anytime soon. But that was just kind of helpful to kind of get an idea of what the county looks like.
I got a question. On your single family 2 to 5 acres, are those also included in the under 40 acre number? Or not? So is it 5 to 40? Is that the number?
Okay, so how that's broke down with a single family, if there's a house on a property, it gets a land use point that says there's a house here. So when we run that in our GIS in the system, it knows to pick them out, knows that they're particularly just as a residential property. So if your house, you may be farmed there, but your house isn't necessarily sectioned out on that piece of property, you would be a single family farm greater than 20 acres. So when it's talking about ag land less than 40 or greater than 40, it's a piece of property that does not have a home on it.
Oh, okay.
So there's some discrepancies, you will, with that, but it's hard. So at what point do we say it is ag land or it's not ag land? So we're trying to break it down just so you can get an understanding of what type of land use is out there.
I guess when I saw that, I looked at it, I thought, okay, is that under 40 then, is that the number of homeowners in Minnehaha County that are designated less than 40 acres as far as taxes and stuff?
Yeah, we're not basing it on that. It's just strictly if it's farm ground with no home on it.
Okay.
Anything else that has a house, single family dwelling
Fits
on it
under one of the other two.
would fit underneath because it's residential at that point. Because the first ones are single family, less than 2 acres, and then 2 to 5. Most of them, when they're that small, it's just a house, it's just single family. Once you get over that 5 acres to 20, some of them are single family and farm. And then, of course, when you get over 20, most of them are farm, but there's still some just single family.
Does this include like rural residential districts?
That's right, and they would be in that single family residential. It doesn't necessarily have to be zoned. Sometimes people get that confused when it's zoned ag. Does that mean it's just ag use? No, because we have rural residentials or properties or subdivisions that are all zoned agricultural, and they're not. They're still residential because that's their use, but the zoning is ag. So yes, some good questions about that. So we were just kind of coming up with the best way to break that down because there is so much space out there that's designated for farmland and different types of farm uses. I guess the other part that, since you had that question, brought that up, we did also underneath the government lands. We had put that together and we saw that there was only 18 parcels that had almost 1,000 acres, and we were wondering, when you divide that out, that's quite a bit per lot. But when we sectioned it out, of course, you have to remember that the landfill is in there, and arrows make up the majority of that. So that's almost 900 acres, or over 900 acres that are just in the landfill and arrows, which leaves 60 some acres to divide between the townships, property they own for their buildings, our 3 parks. So that's how that's divided up too. But if there's anything that you guys look that you think that would like to be sectioned out on that, we can definitely take a look at that. We have the capability to do that. These are just some of the existing land uses that we had sectioned out at this time. The next, as we go along here, is the distribution of residential dwelling units. And I had kind of touched on that as you're reading through here. About the percentages that are within the county. You can see some of our largest townships being Split Rock, Brandon, Mapleton, Benton, Wall Lake, and Wayne. Again, this is just to give the reader an idea of what the county looks like, and also shows the residential trend of the county, which when people go out of the city limits, the majority of them will locate in one of them 6 townships. And so that's a way that when we look at it as far as our building eligibilities, where we want to place them, should they be clustered, should they, are we preserving that ag property or that ag land that it seemed like this group has stated over and over that they would like to do. And then again, it just shows, instead of looking at that map, it just shows a little bit more of a diagram to just kind of read through it to see how the distribution comes out as far as residential dwelling. And of course, this is all existing, what's there right now. It's not looking at into the future at this point. So this is kind of the main thing that comes out of the existing land use, is our existing land use map. What is currently on there. I know it's kind of a little bit harder to see on. Let me shut this light off for a second. Because most of you probably have it in black and white, so I don't know if that helps. Kind of dark then, isn't it? Anyway, so from this map you can look, when I was looking at the ag land, is broken down, you can see in the green there. With the commercial and industrial being in the red and the pink, and a couple of the other residential areas on the bottom left-hand side of the map is where you're seeing the residential acreages from to 2 and then 2 to 5, and as that progression goes. So because that's kind of when we did the existing land use, this is based off of this map, so I think that's, I don't know if the light on now.
What was the blue?
The blue on there is, the bright blue is where the mining activity is taking place. So a lot of that is along Skunk Creek. Skunk Creek, yes.
Blue or purple? The purple?
The bright blue.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay, sure. Yep. What's the purple?
So,
The purple in
so
there?
this bright blue right here, a lot of the mining here, and of course there's mining up here. Then Merlin and Roy's up along here.
What's the purple?
Purple down
North
here.
of Brandon. North of Brandon.
Purple up here. That is the industrial.
Railroad car.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep, same that you'll see there, along with around these exits. You'll see Hartford,
How about the darker blue,
The dark blue.
south of Humboldt?
That's going to be this blue here is our rec areas. So would be that's hunters,
Fish and wildlife.
fish and wildlife, and rec. So I believe that's Hunter's Point. Is right here is a clay pigeon gun club type deal, and then of course down here we have Bald Water West, and then there's some other rec property out in Split Rock Township. Some of that would be game, fish, and parks, that type of property. So you can see in there the majority of that lighter green is egg farm over 40 acres. Is the majority of that land use. And then of course the next majority seems to be that agricultural from 20 to 40 category. Any other questions on that map?
The light green is the 20 to 40, or the
Yeah.
light green?
I'm gonna have to go back on this one here. Hard to read on that one. So we have, under 40 and over 40. So the light green that is the majority of that map is the over 40. Under 40 is a little darker green color that is located on the map. I can't give you a specific area because it's all over within there, that color right there. So the next part, when we were going through the existing land use, is the trends of, what is going on there right now, where are we at? And again, the trend there is agriculture is by far the largest land use in the county, and it's definitely a vital part of our economy at this time. I think with the trend that we can see is that when people are searching for a property, they're looking for sites that are isolated. So they are going away from the farm developments, which seems to be causing issues out there as far as people are farming, the types of equipment or the dust or the dirt or the smell, whatever it might be. So the trend is people move further out to get a piece of property that's isolated, but there's still that farming activity that's going around them. And again, we have looked and we've talked about it many a times about the eligibilities always comes to play with that. How is the best way to deal with them? Obviously, they've already been given to properties, so it's hard to take them away. But the best way to encourage clustering of them so you're able to protect that land. So I don't know if anybody else thinks of or sees any other trend. I know that I just kind of briefly went over what we had written here. If there's any comments, please feel free to interrupt me. The next, going over the existing land use and the residential trends, which in here I did provide a couple of graphs and kind of a sheet in here from Access that is showing you the amount of housing that we have in the county and where it's located at. So as of January 2013, just over 6,000 housing units were in Minnehaha County, which in the unincorporated area, which just over 70,000 in Minnehaha County total with all the municipalities included. And you can see with building permits that we've had, 581 housing units were built between 2003 and 2012. So we also have to look at that trend to where we will be as a population in the future. And one of the larger areas that we look at for the trends is the Wall Lake. Seems to be a popular area. We do see that we expect future growth out there, but the future growth is going to be looked at in terms of what types of infrastructure they have out there and Are they, or will they be expanding their sanitary sewer district? And again, in the residential trends, I did just note of how we are going to be able to encourage the clustering, and that we have been encouraging clustering of eligibilities per our density zoning ordinance. So with the residential trends, we just put together a few graphs here that shows Minnehaha County single-family dwelling units, and then the unincorporated new single-family dwelling units. You can see in the early 2000s how building was spiked up quite significantly, and as you go down into the late 2000s, we were declining, but we do seem to be up even, overall the county, including the cities, and also just the unincorporated part of the county too, that we're seeing a little bit of an increase. It isn't much, but I guess we'll see how that leads in the future. The next trend we'll talk about in here is about the commercial and industrial development trends. With many of our commercial and industrial development, most of it's around Interstate 90 and Interstate 229, 29, and also along the 10 exits that are along them two interstates. Some of them being at the Crooks Renner exit, very popular spot for industrial and commercial development. Also the Hartford exit, and then the Del Rapids and Brandon as well are some of the more populated or developed parts for commercial and industrial development. And as we had talked in prior meetings, and as we had looked in the future, we continue to anticipate that most of our industrial and commercial development will be located along the 10 exits and along the interstates that go in the county, just because of our transportation network and how it runs seems to be popular and easy access for properties of the nature of commercial and industrial. So the next part kind of brings us to our future land use goals. I've drafted some here. I don't know if you guys had taken a look at these. I can go over the goals with you guys. If there's anything, we have any comments so far before we go into them? Not everybody at once.
One thing I noticed, forgive me because I'm sure you've gone over all this before, but on the building trends, the percentage in Sioux Falls is going up, the percentage, so that it's, if you look back, back in 2003, the residential buildings in Sioux Falls were about 5/8, if I'm reading this correctly. And it stays around there, and then this, in 2012, it's better than 4/5. So that if that trend continues, that has implications for the entire country.
That's right.
Is part of that though from Sioux Falls kind of gobbling up some of those unincorporated areas too?
As they move outward, some of the developments, some of the developments have been annexed in, So I guess that would be as far as their number of dwelling units.
That wouldn't, I think those are new starts though, so any annexed subdivisions are not gonna be included. in
Not
that,
new
correct?
building permits.
It's not new.
No. But in terms of single family total, there would be different for the city of Sioux Falls versus the corporate area. But no, you're right.
Gas prices have doubled since 2003 or whatever, so I'm guessing that has something to do with it.
Yeah, all I was saying is, if you look at the rate of growth, if the rate of growth is very different in the three categories, and that has real implications. And right now, it's like Sioux Falls is growing at is taking up a bigger percentage of the total. That's all I was getting at.
And we do, as far as growth in the county versus growth in the city, most of them residential developments, most of that growth as a whole for the county will be in Sioux Falls, and it will be in Brandon, and it will be in them communities, and the majority is not going to be in the unincorporated area because most of that, again, designated for ag use, and with there's not a huge influx of new residential developments as far as subdivisions go in the county at this time anyway.
Probably less and less prime spots that had trees and stuff like that, because a lot of those places are already got a house planted about them. So now it's, it seems like let's see, yeah, but I find someplace with trees, well, just kind of the way it is.
Well, and land costs too are going up. I'm guessing they're not selling, farmers aren't selling eligibilities, they don't need to, I guess.
No. I did notice too on 8, you talk about, the last statement is conflicts, let's see, as farmers implement new ag technologies and adjust to market conditions, conflicts with neighbors are likely to increase. I don't know that farmers adjusting how they farm is going to be the reason for the conflict. And then in the next paragraph, it does say the limitation of these conflicts is important. So we're kind of saying they're going to increase, we should limit them. And I guess I'm not real
What
sure.
paragraph are you on there again?
Page 8.
Ag
It
development trends.
just made me wonder how that would be achieved. And I'm sorry, I didn't get it reviewed as much as I should have. Maybe that's addressed. The only thing I saw was the answer was to promote more clustering. So then I guess my question would be, as eligibilities are applied for to move, will they be limited if they're not clustered? Will that be a consideration?
And I think, we've talked about that previously, about ways to deal with the use of them eligibilities. And I guess at that point, we have to look at, is it going to, if you only have one, then you can't use it. You have to use it in, a group of 4 or a group of 6, and I guess, I know we've talked about it,
Yeah.
but
it's kind of, I'm just wondering what it's like. Okay, conflict's going to increase. We should not have the conflict, we should try and decrease it, but
that's right, but we know there's development going to take place. If you could stop it, then we knew that probably then on the other side of having the conflict between farm and residential, then would slow then as well.
But I think there are criteria that can be taken into play. I mean, you don't have to move that landlocked one, and there's some other stuff like that. But yeah, and reverse setbacks. We talked about that too.
And we are gonna have an ag chapter down. We're gonna hit those.
And Deb, don't you think just the economics of it
Right now.
compared to
Yes.
2003
Right now.
are, let's see, I don't think I don't want to sell that eligibility and have to.
Right
put
now,
up
but
with that.
I think we do need to plan.
It'll
We
change
need to plan
again.
for it.
Yeah.
It'll change.
Yeah, there's no guarantee with that.
No.
Sure.
Yeah, I wish there was.
Absolutely, sure, right, yes.
Wish that was the case.
Are we going to touch on rail service access somewhere later in this?
That's right, and I think as we go forward with future land use, we'll address some more of them areas that we have picked out that we believe that are better suited for commercial or industrial development that would be along that rail.
That's already, part of the Eastern Farmers deal is because it's along rail,
And that you mentioned that, our prior comp plan did address and it wanted the nodes over the hard surface roads, as far as where they meet, that's a good area for commercial or industrial development. Now, we all know that is prime land for that type of use, but sometimes people overlook just, it doesn't have them intersections of that. It could be intersecting with the rail as well, which makes that a really popular spot for a development, just like different types of farm usage. So as we go forward, I just briefly kind of go over some of these goals. You guys had looked at them or anything you wanted to add to them. I know that there will be some more, probably more than likely added in the future as the plan, as we get our chapters together. When we have the ag chapter, we'll probably put some more of the goals into the actual land use. The natural resources chapter will put more into the land use chapter as well. So as them are developed, then we can also transfer them goals into our future land use goals that we have here. So basically, I'll just read one of the first ones here. Develop a county-wide plan use pattern that ensures capability and functional relationships along jurisdictions and related land use activity. So I guess we just want, our townships, our cities, other parties, stakeholders involved to be involved with this as far as smart growth would be considered. We want to make sure that they adopt our future land use plan. So it's just kind of things that this addresses as far as our process goes, where we want it. And the goal number 2 is support growth that is capable with the adopted municipal comprehensive plans. So we have, I know one of the maps that you guys had looked at previously was showed the municipalities and what type of land uses were around them. So where they have residential, we're not going to plan to put a commercial or industrial development. So we're going to work with them communities or work with them townships in terms of what types of land uses or what types of development go in there.
Right, how many municipalities have a joint jurisdiction with the county zoning?
There's Del Rapids and the city of Sioux Falls, and then Brandon has a joint plating district with us, which I guess, so to answer your question, Del Rapids and Sioux Falls. And also Hartford has a plating area, which is the same as Brandon.
Do you guys like having that joint jurisdiction with municipalities or not?
I guess, I think it works out real well. We get more people looking at the development that might be taking place, some more input, whether it's city side or whatever it might be. So I believe that we've had good luck with them relationships.
Did those municipalities initiate that then, I'm guessing?
And some of that has to do with then they have a little bit more say in what was happening there in terms of where their service is going to be. Are they ready? Can they service a development that we might put out there, or no, they can't. It just gets that talking between the two governments.
Does the county commission have to adopt that if, say, the city of Humboldt decide they wanted to do it?
Yeah, it takes both bodies. to
For the zoning.
For the zoning.
For the plating, they can do that unilaterally.
So basically, either entity on zoning can nix it,
They both have to agree on the zoning.
on the zoning plating, it's just a
Plating, the city-
conference type thing.
The city can just adopt that, but whatever city can adopt their a plating jurisdiction.
Okay.
So Brandon could not stop you guys from zoning an area industrial or recreational?
Well, not, I suppose they could always take us to court. I mean, if the city of Brandon felt that somehow some action grievously harmed them, they could go seek injunction at court, but they couldn't stop it by just saying, no, we don't want it.
So then how come some of these communities don't have that same agreement with the county?
They just choose not to do that. Like maybe it could be,
So do you guys like the relationship with the ones that you do like you say Del Rapids and Hartford?
Sioux Falls and Del Rapids have joint zoning. Hartford and Brandon have just a joint plating.
So you like the zoning part joint with Del Rapids?
We don't, we do have that just like we do with Sioux Falls, but we don't have as much development up there, so it isn't something that we utilize real often, but I think it is definitely a good relationship that we have with them.
And they feel the same way?
I guess, I would think so, but I guess you have to ask them.
Somebody has to ask them.
But otherwise I'd say, yeah, sure, why wouldn't they?
Well, no, it's not something they were forced into doing. They wish to have that joint with.
I think sometimes maybe a better analogy is it works really well with Sioux Falls because we have a lot more activity with the city of Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
I think that with Del Rapids, sometimes the lack of frequency, it just doesn't, I mean, there's always like we're restarting it then, not restarting it, but it just doesn't happen very often. And
When it does, you kinda gotta go backtrack and do everything.
well, yeah, it's just like it just works much better with Sioux Falls because we have a lot more activity and there's
More repetitiveness with it. You're
yeah.
using it all the time, where it stays familiar to everybody.
yeah.
And they also, they have, Sioux Falls actually has, planning staff that advise them at their
Yeah.
normal planning commission meeting. Now, Del Rapids has a planning commission, but they don't have planners on staff. They have their city administrator that I believe does most of the work and for that committee, but I don't know their involvement at the city, if they're there every month or every other month. Yeah.
I think a lot of times it worked well together. I think we generally always supported whatever they wanted to do. However, sometimes if they didn't want to be the bad guy and they were looking for direction, you were able to provide that, and then, we were able to support them in that as well.
So then for the growth management for residential, and again, I just put the one goal in here, which there will be more for the residential side for future land use, but again, as we have the rest of part of that chapter developed, we will add to it. But again, promoting development and the clustering of eligibilities in the appropriate area while preserving ag property. And there is a lot, it sounds like a very short sentence, but there's a lot involved that comes in with being able to, or clustering eligibilities, preserving ag land, having people that have had them eligibilities forever and telling them at a time, essentially, you can't use it because you need to cluster it together, you need to put it by your house, and they've been there for 100 years and they don't want a house right next to theirs. They want it at the corner across, that they would not interrupt any activity they might do. So I think then there's a lot of people that own just one eligibility then. Many that own multiple, that is easier to cluster when you own 6 of them versus if you only own 1 or 2. And in case you guys understand, the eligibility is the 1 per quarter, just to make sure that throwing them terms around and people don't understand.
And yet that same process would have gone through in the 70s when they first went to the density zoning. I mean, that was a big change for everybody then too. But I think everybody agrees it was a good change.
But now those people who own those eligibilities are gonna have them basically taken away and stripped of, correct?
Well, I mean,
If you go to that plan, if you go to the clustering idea, like you said, the one person who owns 1 or 2 eligibilities, he lost the value of that eligibility because it's gonna have to be removed.
yeah,
But does it have to be forced clustering, or could it be, see, right now, you don't really have that option, right? To do clustering?
Yeah, you can.
You can't
Well,
do clustering.
up to so many, right?
you could put them together if you had.
If you had 22 of them,
You
you
could
could
put
put
them
them all
together.
together.
Oh, they're what, an acre apiece or?
Yeah.
So
If
what
you
you're
own
saying as a
22,
county, that's what
If I
you're
own.
promoting
Yeah.
at this moment in time, is the
Right.
clustering. But I think if push come to shove in court, if they had an eligibility, they could probably sell it,
Or use it.
Well,
or use it.
you mean if they had just one and they didn't want to cluster it?
Yeah.
Well, right now they would be able to use it right now, but it's.
But if you change the rules,
That's right.
Yeah, that's,
if we change the rules, now they will have they could possibly have an eligibility that isn't in the value.
so and
How-
that basically
How?
depends.
Yeah.
If they're in an ag zoned area
Mm-hmm.
and it's strictly ag, then the new comprehensive plan might not allow them to build on their own property. They would have to put it into a cluster.
Because one doesn't cluster very well. It's just
One doesn't cluster by itself.
No, I understand that.
Or when you think some people maybe purchase land, as I look at how it's sold in real estate, with 2 housing eligibilities or whatever, maybe paid more for that.
And they used one.
And they use one
Now
or
they
the
have
other for a
land.
grandchild or something someday, or,
In their view, that is of less
I can see
value.
where you-
So
the court
by
would pass
creating
it.
the rule the last time, I think kind of created your own problem to deal with later on.
Well, but it restricted it. I mean, before you could have put multiple
You
on.
could put
and
houses
of
all
course, you're
over.
never guaranteed, there are some criteria, but if it's landlocked, you're never guaranteed that you can transfer that out.
Right.
I mean, there have been a lot of assumptions that if I have one, I can move it wherever I want, not necessarily so.
Well, the rules are now, you can move it anywhere within that
Section.
You need to
on
get
the
a
ground that you
landlocked
own.
one, you need to get a conditional use permit to move it.
On the ground that you own.
Yeah, you have to own it,
Yes.
just like you said. You can move it anywhere adjacent to or
Right.
continuous to your property. You can move that eligibility, but if you don't own any of the land continuous or joining that, you're not able to move.
But I think what Deb's saying is, you still have to apply for the conditional use permit to move that, which may or may not be granted. The landlocked one that's in the middle of the quarter.
Mhm.
See, right now where I live, the farm we live on is 110 acres, and we have our house on that farm, and I have one eligibility that I haven't used. So by the clustering concept, that eligibility becomes basically worthless.
Unless you would, that's right.
Unless
Unless-
you
Put it alongside
next to
yours.
your house.
Yeah, unless there's two, is that clustering?
It's to a cluster.
Two is a cluster?
Or is that-
Can't cluster everybody, you cluster
The idea would be that you're leaving more ag land open to farm, rather than creating the issues of going in between and around.
Let's please not advertise that.
Yeah.
We as government, an entity.
Board
consider
decision.
To a cluster.
Gaggle of geese or cattle or something.
With that being kind of a hot topic to decide, that we don't want to take them away, because I know in the end it's not really feasible to take them away. I think us as staff, I guess we can't ever say what our commission, what the end result would be, but we can speculate in a way, believing that they're just not going to do away with all eligibilities.
And we've eliminated the possibility or the thought of being able to move them, transfer them to other property.
That's still on the.
That's still on the table,
Still
too.
on the table, yeah,
Okay.
and when we get to
So
that
that
chapter.
could be a solution to the clustering issue, right?
Yeah, I think we almost have to, if you do the clustering and you're not able to, you have to be able to move it somewhere else that you can sell it or,
Right.
you know, be able to profit off that to even that out.
Right.
Have you sought a legal opinion on any of that?
We have not talked with our state's attorney about it, no.
Because it would seem to me, if there are certain things that would not pan out legally, it'd be good to know that before you start making decisions.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think as a task force, we have to come up with a plan so they can go to the legal counsel and say, this will gonna work, you know?
Right.
Right now, we don't have a
It
plan.
would seem, common sense, it would seem to me, if you have an eligibility, and now the county says we're changing the rules, and it's basically worthless,
Yeah,
that seems to me would
be a problem.
be a real problem.
Yeah.
And so, you know, knowing that
Yep.
would make a difference in what your group would
But
say.
what would make that different from 40 years ago when there wasn't a comprehensive plan where you could build a house anywhere? You know, you put rules in place and, you know, instead of selling 160 houses lots, now I can sell 4. You know, and if you change that again to make it 2, that's what the rules are then.
Well, it's only a taking if all the uses are taken away. And you still have the agricultural use on that property of, you're just you just would no longer maybe have the use to build a residence on there, but you still would have full use of ag potential on that. So there, while it may be a little bit unpalatable and uncomfortable, there's still a use provided for that property. And things, like Steve said, change.
But where I see the other side of the people who purchased that property with the idea of building a house, with the extra costs they went to because eligibility supposedly had a value, now the county's coming and taking the value away.
That's no different than any commercial
Speculation.
speculator. I mean, our school district bought land for $10,000 an acre. That's probably worth $3,000 now. You know, and we're not going to be able to recover that $7,000 just because the market's gone down. So
I mean,
But you
it's-
still have the option to build a school.
we still have the option to build a school. We still have the option, and that land is still can be used for.
But if the county were to come along and say, we bought this with the possibility of building a school, but we're not gonna let you
If they-
build there anymore.
If they zoned it that say that you can't build it there because there's a gravel pit there, I mean, you know, the market would dictate what
You'd sell gravel, right?
we'd sell gravel. So,
But I think we have to keep in mind here that this is still a discussion.
Right.
And, you know, we're gonna come up with something that's pretty palatable, I think, for most people, because we understand that those eligibilities are a
Commodity.
pretty substantial commodity, I guess, to rural,
Yeah, I don't think things are gonna change, but if, I'm just saying that should they ever wanna change them, there's, lists of Supreme Court cases that support government being able to change zoning without people's approval. I mean, that's just the way it is.
I think it kind of went to such extreme that a lot of these eligibilities did restrict some of the farming practices. I mean, we had how many people coming in here that wanted to expand their farm operations, and because of the eligibilities that were sold around them, they were halted. They were halted in an ag district. And,
Ag state.
you can't go into an ag zoned area and say, well, I've got a right to put a house next to you, but you don't have a right to expand
Yeah.
the use that you're
build
doing.
a hog shed.
Yeah.
maybe, and I know I've raised this issue before here, and it wasn't very popular, maybe we should go to what Cottington County does, and I think it's 20 or 30 acres if you're gonna build a new house on a green site. You have to have a minimum of, is it 30 acres, I think? You guys know, Scott?
No, I don't know.
I mean, that prices a lot of people out of building a house in the countryside, but, you know, some people would think that's good.
We had some discussion, I think, in one of our meetings, if I recall correctly, if a farmer wants to put up a hog barn or feedlot or something, I think there's a setback requirement of, is it a half a mile from the nearest home? Is that what it is?
Depending on the size, depending on
Right,
the animal
right.
units, yeah.
Now, the same thing, but, so he can't build close, but somebody can build a house right beside his feedlot, whether he likes it or not.
Which is that reverse setback.
Right,
but, yeah.
so, yeah, I think we need to consider that closer too, as doing a reverse setback on building
Mhm.
homes in the country.
Yes.
Is there anything in the planning commission now that has that?
Not here, us, you mean? No, we do not have an ordinance that regulates that. But I
So
think
we
if-
also see that with our public lands too, you know, where you have a public wildlife area, there might be an eligibility in that quarter. People tend to want to put their house right next to it. It looks good until people are out there shooting in the farms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that I think during your guys' presentation, I believe that we had talked about that too.
Well, and then
But
you
it's
could
good
also, yeah, you could also do that, the whole concept of reverse setbacks against the rail tracks. I mean, maybe you shouldn't build anything within 1 mile of the rail lines. No residences because of potential derailments or,
Well, it's legitimate, if you did have a derail, what's carrying hazardous waste, it's a legitimate
So you're
concern.
gonna tear down all the towns that are built on the railroad tracks?
no,
But
you're lessening the potential for conflict, for land use conflict by saying, you know, you
At
can't
this
build a
point in
house.
time,
If it's within a quarter mile or whatever that setback is, 800 feet of a rail track, existing rail track. I mean, I think that, you know, we have lots of issues. We have ag issues, we have hunting, recreation, there's transportation issues, I mean, so.
Well, it's kind of like, people don't have common sense. You tell them they can't build a house in a floodplain. I mean, you think nobody would want to, but
Yeah.
I guess I'll just go over just the one more here that I had on commercial and industrial. And of course, is supporting commercial and industrial development in these areas. Again, we had talked about the intersections, the nodes, as long as they're compatible with our existing land use or our future land use map that we pretty much have created because of this group, what we've looked at, things that we've worked on to create the future land use map, which is in the very last page of this first document. The other one is here is for our ag uses, and I guess I can we'll address that when we do our ag chapter as well. But the one that's on here is protect and preserve agricultural uses and the economic vitality of farming operations. So again, we're limiting the residential development in some of them areas. I guess it's always that residential development goes on each one of these trends and can go on each set of these goals for growth management, for ag and residential rec uses. So you'll see this map again. Again, we'll be looking at future land use in that section as we move forward. So if there's not any other questions or we can move on with the next chapter too.
I have a question is, you've looked at, single housing units and all of this stuff. Have you looked at age of population and such too? Is that a factor to consider in anything?
Looked at the
Young
numbers,
families.
but there's not huge fluctuation actually. I mean, overall in the state there is, but in Minnehaha County there's not. I mean, Sioux Falls is younger than the outlying communities, but, it's really kind of steady.
Hate to tell you this, you're getting older.
At the same rate as everyone else.
The alternative isn't very good.
In terms of residential, the people that are affording to build homes out in the county, if that's what you're kind of basing your question, that it's not, your first starter home is not going to be rural acreage out in the county, more than likely.
Do you have an idea how many of those housing eligibilities are left? Are we gonna, is there a, can we
There's
run
a
out
lot.
or?
I can't tell you.
400 or 500.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
And what percentage is that from the original? Remember we had 80% of them used up?
Oh gosh, no, we're more like 30%.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some townships, I would say, like Split Rock is getting a lot,
Close.
much closer. But then if you want to go up to Buffalo Township, you could probably.
I was surprised
Like a
you
whole
look
new
at
town up there.
that graph, Highland is less than Buffalo.
It's a smaller township,
Yes,
isn't it?
yeah, you lose a
Half the
whole
size.
line
Oh, I
of
suppose it
a
is.
section.
Yeah.
It's a short township, but.
I have another question. Is this stuff submitted to the state at all, or? is
No,
the state-
no, this is all local. They give us the authority to do this from state law.
And the reason that comes to my mind is just, when I look at Minnehaha County, and, when the wind was blowing, it was so dry this summer, I thought, okay, or this fall, Minnehaha County didn't seem too bad, but as you drove across the state, or I went to Yankton or Vermillion, and I saw the dust flying and such, I thought, wow, there's a lot of land that's been tilled up that maybe a little bit, but,
We had less rain further south too.
Yeah.
Than what Minnehaha County had.
yeah.
There's a lot of difference from Crooks to Hartford.
Well, the next chapter is the natural resources and open space, which is basically about what the title says there. Looking at our resources in the county, which are, of course, the water, our soil, sand and gravel, and then Sioux quartzite. The first part is just basically a summation of what you can find here in the county. And so if you want to just go ahead to the next page, the second page, list the major streams that we have are in the Sioux River and the tributaries. Our lakes and wetlands, obviously everybody knows that Wall Lake is our big lake. And then our wetlands, mostly on the western part. We did put a sentence in here under lakes and wetlands at the bottom that some of the tiling practices are causing some of these wetlands to disappear. They may not be qualified as wetlands on any map or for farming purposes, but they are wet spots that are being filled in by tiling practices to have them be used for more crop production.
Oh, let's run that by me
I'm
again.
not saying it's a bad thing, right? I'm just saying it's happening that, some
We
of them.
can't tile a wetland.
No, I'm not saying the ones that are qualified as wetlands, but then we have just wet spots, maybe put it that way.
Nuisances.
There you go.
Okay.
I'll put that in there. The next page is our map of the county, showing the rivers or streams, the ones that are named in the county, and then the floodplains. The floodplain map is overlaid. That's the shaded color or the blue up on the screen. And of course, the big Sioux River, as we all know, that's where a lot of the major flooding is, and that's where most of the floodplain is between here and Bell Rapids. And then again along Skunk Creek and Slip Up and Split Rock Creek have the bigger areas. The next is about our floodplain. And figured Renner was a good place to picture on this, given that we had some pretty good
Doesn't look
shots.
a lot different,
I know
does it?
of what's happened in the past there. We are under FEMA for insurance, for our insurance program. We do control that. Through our office, we actually have over 43,000 acres that are in the floodplain, according to FEMA, which is, of course, as we know, is not always correct. And then we do have a few, we have some of our villages, especially Renner, that are, were built way back, started next to the river where they needed to be, but, today are paying the price when they're flooding pretty consistently. We have aquifers. There's actually 9, this will be the next page, 9 aquifers under the county. And we have the big 3, which is Split Rock Creek, the Sioux Quartzsite, and the Skunk Creek aquifers, which I would guess that most of us are getting our water supply from. And laid over those aquifers, we currently have a water source protection area, which is in the zoning district. It covers over 56,000 acres. And this allows us to offer some further protection on top of those aquifers. We restrict, you couldn't start a new CAFO under there, an animal feeding operation. There's bigger restrictions for tanks, like being double walled and so forth. So we do have that extra protection there. And again, then we have the map showing, they clearly follows where the major floodplains are. And then of course, that's where the aquifers run as well. When we look at what we're considering our natural resources, soil, of course, we would consider the most important, as it's our economic base here. It provides for a lot of jobs and related jobs. This county is actually one of the best producing in the area as far as the number of farms, and also in corn production, overall crop production, and also for dairy, which is for a very compact county, I think it's doing very well. One of the things we mentioned in here is the need to actually have good soil management practices. So, and I'm sorry I forgot your name, as you mentioned, things were blowing away, and so making sure that we have good protection for keeping our soil here to continue to grow things is important. One of the things we do have in the county are our county parks. We actually have 3 parks. All of them given to us by donation. And so, I think most people are familiar with our Wall Lake Park, which is about 25 acres, and it's the oldest one we have in the county. Then our Booker Prairie, which is the newest park, and that is located north of town in Spearbrook Township. And then we also have the Prairie Nature Area, which is now managed by the city but still owned by the county, and that's located on the west of town as you take 42 out towards Highway 11 there.
East of town.
I'm sorry, east of town. Thank you. Thanks, Ron. And so then the next is just a map showing where we have not only the county parks, but some of the state parks and rec areas.
Are you guys able to monitor somehow the use of the county parks, or guess?
Not really.
Yeah, I don't, we have a way of, because we don't have staff there, every day around the clock, so it's kind of hard to.
And particularly like Wall Lake, you have people coming and going all the time at the beach when it's summer.
So you don't have to have a park pass for
It's free.
free.
Because they're county instead of state.
Yeah, all the county parks are free.
What's Lake Elm? Is that state, Lake Elm?
It's in Lincoln County. I'm not sure what it
Is
is.
that state?
It's a state.
Okay, so then you gotta have a park pass.
Yes, but there's actually a Parks Division and Wildlife Division, so for the Parks Division side, yes. you need a park pass.
State parks, county,
Do you get any feedback about is it Booker Prairie? Does anybody?
The birding club loves it. We
The
have
which
gotten
club?
birders, bird watching.
Birds.
They're very fond of it.
The only things I ever see there when I go by is the birds.
Yeah, I think we have some people that are regulars, from what I hear, walking out there. I think it takes a while for people to find out that it actually exists, but.
So a lot of people drive by and don't know what it is.
Arrows there, isn't it? So,
East of Midway, on the way to
Yeah.
Garrettson.
Yeah, it's right on the two highways there. Yeah.
And is it the zoning office that is in charge of maintenance of those places, or the highway department?
No, it's our office.
Yeah. There's a division, we have a parks division, but Scott manages that part of it, so. But when we did our open houses, we got a pretty good feedback on all the parks. I mean, there weren't a lot of people that knew about Booker Prairie, but Wall Lake rated very highly for its use, and people liking it, thinking it was in pretty good condition.
Is anything ever looked at like tying the parks together, you know, or I'm just thinking of bicycle trails, you know, from Hartford to Sioux Falls, there's that. You know, and I think of tourism, you know, next to agriculture, I think tourism is our next highest income center in South Dakota. I think, is that ever looked at?
Yeah, we have looked at it. Some of it is the cost of doing
You
that.
say nobody wants to pay for it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we've heard from Brooke had to leave, but she's with the state highway, and they're supportive of, if they're widening a road, adding enough shoulder or a bike lane. They're looking at that, if they have the money again to do that. So we would like to, and I think when we get to our transportation part of this, there will be plans in there for where to put potential bike paths. And the county highway has also been very supportive on that idea too, when they're doing road work, to plan that into their plans and add that as an option.
Yeah, I have a question. The Perry Nature area, is there any collaboration that's going to be done with the Arboretum there? You know?
I'll let Scott answer.
Yeah, I
that.
mean,
He's
we have
on
a
the
joint
board,
powers
so-
agreement with the Arboretum. That's who's basically in control of that now.
What are they, just a general question, you know, they built a big building there. Is that going to be an educational facility?
Yeah.
Is that what that is? Okay.
And I think it'll be for rent too.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
they'll be having, yeah, it'll be a educational facility, but you'll be able to rent it for hosting events. There'll be a huge garden area to the north of that, that you'll be able to walk out into, and it's gonna be quite extensive.
Dodge the goose poop.
But
Well,
You're thinking of the other park.
Yeah.
You're thinking of Arrowhead Park.
Oh, that's
It's not
okay.
far from there though.
No,
It's on the other side of the
the
highway.
Arrowhead Park's on the
Oh,
south
okay.
side of the road.
Confined, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah. The smorgasbord is at Perry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, then Andy, we were in your area. A lot of this information came from when your presentation was here before the task force, looking at the number of game production areas that we have in Minnehaha County at 13 and the number of acres. And I'm sure everybody knows we have our 3 state parks, the Big Sioux Rec area, the Beaver Nature area, and Palisades State Park as well. And then the last section looks at our sand, gravel, and quartzite deposits, which is significant to our county as far as jobs, and then our using it for road creation, etc. Mining operations are allowed through the ag zoning district and recreation and conservation, which is where most of them would lie along the rivers. And so that is by conditional use permit. So there's always a public hearing on that, and then they also have to meet their state regulations to operate. One of the biggest complaints about those operations is the truck traffic. And there are some areas that we have regulated which direction they can leave a pit so that they avoid some of the more developed housing. The problem is that we have a lot of those areas that have been out there before there was any regulations. And so they pretty much have carte blanche on what they want to do and which way to go. Whether they want to put down net water or not.
How's this Sioux Cup development gonna work with Merle and Roy's and the rest of the neighbors in that, on West 12th?
On West 12th, they annexed to the city, so.
Is there a problem?
Well, I mean, maybe where they're gonna build the housing around the lake
Yeah.
there, and yeah.
I mean, that's, you can spit on Merle and Roy's
Yeah.
bid from there.
Right.
Okay.
That's
Just
at the
curious.
corner of T. Ellis and 12th Street on the northwest corner there. Gonna be a big housing development and commercial, and the pits will become lakes and, yeah, just got annexed, so they're working on it.
Yes. A lot of money shooting.
And so then from the trucks also dust, we get a lot of complaints about dust. And there's just only so much you can do to try and control that. And so those are the bad deals. And then when
Go someplace else.
Merlin Roy's went out there by Rowena, they actually, every time they blast, have a list that they notify, and they call our office too to say that we are, and I suppose you're on it, Bonnie, that they're blasting, and to let them know. And
Oh, good. Another list.
yeah, I've gone out there and stood by houses and not felt it, but they think that their houses are moving, and I mean, they had the little, whatever the reader is, and there's nothing going on, but, you know, they're close enough that they feel they're being impacted, and yeah. So, looking at the goals and some of the action statements to meet those goals, the first one, to preserve the quality of natural resources, pretty straightforward, but a lot of these came out of our discussions we had when we had Game and Fish and Parks here speaking to you. One of it was looking at putting buffers around water bodies and wetland areas, and in conjunction with that would be action 1.3, looking at putting in some setbacks to distance the residential houses from the park land, because there is kind of a need, as Andy spoke about. You know, you put your house right there, and then you've got, you know, people that are hunting, and I think people don't think ahead about those things. And I think one of the other things that came up is that action 1.2 was that if you are changing your shoreline, you're actually supposed to get a permit from Game, Fish and Parks. And I think that was news to a lot of us. So I think we want to work on a way that we can get the word out to people too that come in for permits on other things, that they do need to be working on that. The second goal is to promote sustainable use of natural resources. Again, this is looking at trying to keep our open spaces, keep them connected for animals. Make sure that we support any means of people that want to restore areas. And then again, and I think Deb, this may have come from you too, on this one, looking at trying to get the county highway and townships and game, fish, and parks together and working on projects, you know, where I think it was with the bridge where something got built and taken out, and trying to get the right steps in order on that. The third goal deals with floodplains and aquifers, and basically the goals are making sure we're enforcing the floodplain development ordinance, and then also keeping our water source protection area over those aquifers. And then so the last page is looking at access to public lands. We want to ensure that through our office, through the plating process, but in other ways also too, that we keep our hands in, make sure that people always have access to those public lands, that somehow they're not getting cut off, that, you know, you make sure if you need the easement that you get that to get in there so that we all can use those areas. And then the last goal looks at the gravel and sand deposits, and it would also be quartzite, and knowing that we need those uses here, that they are good for our economic community. However, they do cause some problems. So maybe looking at requiring, before there's actually a zoning hearing, that there are public meetings held with the neighbors in the area, so that, you know, firsthand they can get some of their questions asked before they come to a public hearing, required public hearing. Making sure that we take, when we do have a mine that's approved, that we look at the impacts that it's going to have on the neighborhood and try to look at the best way to minimize those, either through hours of operation or having, you know, mag water requirements on the gravel roads, or even require paving on some of the roadways, etc. So that kind of sums up this chapter. If anybody has any comments or questions?
Yes, I got a couple of things
Great.
that I thought of. One thing that people don't often think about is wildlife itself is a natural resource.
Okay.
When
That's
you
true.
look at, you know, ag is the #1 economic for our state. You mentioned tourism. Number 3 is probably recreation. When you look at hunting, fishing, and bird watching. And I wouldn't say Minnehaha County is really a destination spot for our state,
Right.
but there's still quite a bit of people that either they have family here or relatives where they come here and they still recreate, whether it's hunting, fishing. And bird watching is one that's really, has always been pretty high. You'd be amazed how many people do that, so.
Okay, great, yeah.
So that would be one thing to consider. And the other one is that when you talk about other federal lands, not just game production areas, but there's waterfowl production areas. And I think that maybe
Yeah.
should be included in some of your
Definitely.
goals.
Okay, great.
Are there federal production areas and state production areas?
Yes.
Yes, and Dustin pointed out that I did not put the federal ones in there. That will be added.
Oh, just, you know.
You know how he is.
I mean, you see production areas and you don't always pay attention to
Yeah.
whether it's state or federal.
Yeah, basically all the green and white signs are federal. The yellow signs are state. And white signs are still, they're privately owned, but we lease them to grants too. And then we do have an area, the Beaver Lake area is actually called the waterfowl access area. It's not-
Access or?
The main difference there is we don't pay property tax on waterfowl access here.
Oh, good. Way to go. Good thing it's in West Central.
It's a pretty small piece.
It's Central. Is the, so you don't own the state of North?
So we move on to the next one?
No.
The next one is historic preservation. I wrote that. It's not formatted exactly like everyone else's, but that's not a big deal. And I could throw out a picture of an old church or something. But, I think that this is a relatively concise chapter. It's not really heavy on the thou shalls and whatnot. I think it just wants to recognize that we as a community, and I think it's been brought up that tourism is a very important aspect, and this is probably one of the elements that actually bring people to our area, because we have historic communities, we have historic structures. So, you know, basically I've indicated some statistics that I got from the state South Dakota Department of Historic Preservation, the SHPO, and they have indicated that from 2002 to 2012, there were 45 historic tax credit projects with an overall value of $40 million just in our community in Minnehaha County. And at that same time, there were Deadwood grants awarded to projects in Minnehaha County in the amount of $465,000. The third paragraph basically indicates that preservation planning and implementation offers a lot of benefits in a variety of ways. The conservation of existing resources controls urban sprawl. It is sound preservation practices and sustainability and a greener lifestyle, because you're not taking all of that material and taking it to the landfill or burning it. You're not using new material to renovate that or to build a new structure if it can be rehabbed in such a way that it's useful. And then they also then give us a sense of place. So that's basically what the third paragraph says. And then I just included a few, 3 goals basically. And if you felt that we needed others, I'd be glad to we could put those in there and be glad to include them. But the goal is to basically, or to protect the historic integrity of Minnehaha County for its citizens, its visitors, investors, and property owners. I think we need to look at historic preservation as an investment in the property. And by the way, we did have one picture of a site on the historic on the historic register. The Renner Ball Diamond is on the National Register of Historic Places, and I think there's a little plaque out there. The second goal is to promote the economic, cultural, historic, and educational well-being of the community. And third is to enhance pride in historic accomplishments within Minnehaha County. I think that we have a very long history, not only ag history of homesteaders, we have a history of rock cutters, of quarrying and mining, and I think that's what's nice about that East Sioux Falls site, the Perry Nature Area, is that the Sioux Falls Arboretum is going to be actively promoting the history of East Sioux Falls, the quarry, the stone cutters that live there. And I think that all goes into making our community, giving us a sense of community, makes us something different than what Brookings has or Watertown. And in some ways that should be preserved. And to what degree, I think that's open to interpretation. It doesn't say that if you have an old barn on your property, it has to be saved. I just think it's something that we should put out there and just acknowledge that it's important to some degree. So that's, well, I guess there's a fourth one, sorry, a fourth goal, and that is to educate the public to the benefits of historic preservation of structures, areas, sites, and other historic resources which are listed or eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. That's just a general, leave the door wide open. And this may end up as part of the history. I'm not sure yet where this will end up in the comp plan, but tourists like to see old buildings and structures and whatnot. And I think if you just look at, for example, the old courthouse museum, you know, in the 60s when this building was built, the idea was that was going to be knocked down and turned into a parking lot. And I think, yes, there has been some cost involved with keeping that structure viable, but I think it's an awesome looking structure that you just don't find anywhere else in communities across South Dakota where you have that beautiful building. So that's it. If you have any other ideas of goals, let us know.
All right, I think that kind of sums up our discussion. Of course, you guys have my email. If there's things you think of, or there's things you jotted in your in the notes here, or on, you know, you can provide them to me, leave them with me, whatever you'd like. That would be great. Or email me your notes or what you found, or whatever you'd like. That would be great. I always want your comments as much as we can. I guess what we're looking at, I guess for next time, I'm not sure if next month we'll meet, but for sure I believe on April 4th. But I will let you guys know via email regarding when our next meeting date is. I know everybody should have gotten our new calendar for 2013. If you haven't, let me know. But that's what we're looking at going forward. And I will send you them chapters as they become available. So
There is a meeting scheduled for March, right?
there is.
There is. So we may not have one.
That's right. Depending on what chapters are ready, no sense to make sure you guys have enough to look at and review before we come back here again.
So I can schedule something else that day.
Yeah, I think we'll look at just going to April,
Yeah.
especially if we're gonna tackle the ag chapter. That one's
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We introduced this gentleman here too.
Yeah, I'm Nick Bosch. I'm with the Minnehaha County Economic Development Association. So glad to be here and listening.
The new
Learn
director,
from all of
so
you.
we need, it's a gift that you would call us.